I just listened to every album by Aerosmith, and here are my thoughts. So, my background with Aerosmith is pretty limited. I grew up around an Aerosmith Greatest Hits album, so I knew some of that. Also, just what you hear from radio and movies and stuff like that. And then around 8-ish years ago or so, a buddy of mine, huge Aerosmith fan, encouraged me to go through the Aerosmith discography, and I only got around 4 or so albums in. I wasn't really listening to discographies back then, and I really only liked metal back then anyway. So yeah, I didn't really fall through with it. This would be my chance to make it up to him, but he doesn't talk to me anymore because I'm not a Jehovah's Witness anymore. That's just what happens when you're born as a witness. If you later in life decide you don't believe it, then the only social structure you're allowed to have will just pretend like you don't exist. But I digress. This was a really cool experience to go through, and I learned a few really cool things. So one is that unlike bands like AC/DC or Kiss, where they have some deep cuts, but for the most part, you get their greatest hits, you get a couple live albums, you're getting the best that they have to offer. Aerosmith is a consistently solid band with a lot of really good deep cuts. So Aerosmith starts out in 1973 with their debut self-titled album, and this is a decent collection of some blues rock tracks. Not their best, they're pretty much all the best that Aerosmith has to offer is very much yet to come. Of course, this album does have Dream On it, which is maybe their best song. It's surprisingly good, almost confusingly good at this point in their career, where the rest of what they're making is just kind of like okay formulaic blues rock. Then they have this one random amazing song that was just gifted to them by the gods of music. Like imagine if AC/DC just came out with like Beethoven's Ninth or something. Moving Out was another standout song for this, and more of a standout of the deep cuts. In any case, Get Your Wings comes up next in 1974, and this is a consistently much better album. Like, every song is really good. It also comes with Same Old Song and Dance, which is one of my favorite Aerosmith songs. My other big standouts for this one were Woman of the World and Seasons of Wither. Seasons of Wither especially was such a good song. I don't love the power ballads that came later on in Aerosmith's career, but these ballads earlier in their career, pretty much all of them were really good. Then in 1975, you have Toys in the Attic, which I think is their best album. It seems like a lot of people think that. It's fast, it's ferocious. The title track is so catchy, it gets stuck in my head all the time. But you also get Adam's Apple, which I enjoyed. Walk This Way, which is a super popular song. Sweet Emotion, which is another one of their best songs. And then Round and Round was another song I really liked, more on the deep cut side. Now, while I think that Get Your Wings and Toys in the Attic are their two best albums, their next two albums still very much keep up this career high. That seems to be very agreed upon in the next album. This next album being Rocks, released in 1976, which had Rats in the Cellar, which I really liked. Combination was another more on the deep cut side that I really liked. Oh, and then Nobody's Fault from this album was another really good standout track to me, but still keeping a really solid energy throughout the whole album. Their next album, Draw the Line, a lot of people think that this is a considerable step down in their career, but I actually disagree. Like, yeah, I can tell that Draw the Line is messy and drug-addled, but it's still so good. It's almost like when Alice Cooper's music got, like, clearly drug-inspired, and you're just like, hey, like, a lot of people can't keep up that energy, but these guys can. So the title track, Draw the Line, and then Critical Mass were my favorite songs from this album. Next, we get into what I think is their first career low point, which consists of their next two albums. The first one being Night in the Ruts. So this was released in 1979, and I just think their energy is a lot lower. Their inspiration is a lot lower. The opening track, No Surprise, was to me clearly the best song from this album. Think About It was also a pretty good song from this album. It also includes a song called Remember (parentheses Walking in the Sand), which was a famous song from, I believe, the 60s, but those of us on TikTok a lot might know it as the Oh No song. Then in 1982, they released Rock in a Hard Place, which is one of their worst overall albums to me. The title track and then Lightning Strikes were pretty good, but most of the rest of this album just, again, it felt messy and lazy and uninspired, and much like how Love Gun by Kiss opened with Christine 16, which I said was an FBI watch list song. This opens with a song called Jailbait, which is really an FBI watch list song. Fortunately, their career starts coming back after this. So in 1985, they released Done with Mirrors, which I thought was a pretty solid album. It had very few points that I thought were amazing, but I can tell that they got some of their spark back, some of their energy back. I thought that the last 3 or 4 songs on this album is really where it shines the most. So here's where Aerosmith enters a next major phase in their career, where rather than being very blues rock, they lean into a glam rock sound. And you could always pick up some hints of glam from their music before, but now they're really going into like 80s, hair rock, glam rock. This is a sound that suits them well, and I'm surprised at how long they can keep it up. So Permanent Vacation comes out next, which is filled with hits, filled with excellent deep cuts. So Ragdoll, Dude Looks Like a Lady, and Angel will be your main like singles and radio hits from this album. But I also really liked the title track, and then Cimaraya was a deep cut that really stood out to me. And they really keep this energy up. Their next album is Pump, which has Love in an Elevator, which is a popular song from it. It also has Young Lust and Fine, which I don't know how popular these songs are, but they stood out to me. I really liked them. And throughout the whole album, they're still keeping up this like high energy sound, proving still that this glam rock direction they're going in is suiting them really well. Then they released Get a Grip in 1993, which is still surprisingly a really good album. Like, I keep expecting another career low point to hit, but I came away with this album with a lot of really positive feelings. Eat the Rich was one of my favorite songs from this. Living on the Edge, which I knew of before. It's a very popular song, but still one of my favorites. Also like the title track, Fever, and Line Up. But again, the whole album was pretty enjoyable to listen to. So now it's time for us to go into another low point, and it's a low point that they sadly don't recover from. They end their recording career on a low point. So with 4 albums left, we have 9 Lives, released in 97. This album wasn't too bad. It's it's getting into their low point. It could get difficult to listen to, especially since they filled it with like really cheesy power ballads. But when this album was good, it was really good. And what I'm specifically talking about is songs like Full Circle, Something's Gotta Give, and Crash were the other main ones. So once those songs came up, I was like, oh, thank God Aerosmith has still got it. They just can't really bring it for a whole album anymore. Then they released Just Push Play in 2001, which is a considerable step down still from 9 Lives. So we're looking at like down at the bottom of the list, some of the worst that they've produced. This album did have Jaded, which was its lead single. It's a pretty good song. It also had Light Inside, which is pretty good, more on the deep cut side. But this is, besides like Rock in a Hard Place, this is one of the only Aerosmith albums I've heard yet where I did not enjoy almost the entire album. In 2004, they released an album of covers called Honkin' on Bobo. Yeah, I know, it's a silly title. Now, just because it's an album of covers, it by default kind of goes to the bottom of my list, because when I'm listening to their creativity, I'm listening to their ability to create something. Anyone can just pick a list of songs they really like and play them. That said, this album is more enjoyable to listen to than their worst albums, for sure. And then in 2012, they released their final studio album, Music from Another Dimension, which was about as weak as Just Push Play. One of this album's lead singles, Oh Yeah, I thought was pretty good. And then there was a deep cut called Street Jesus that I thought was pretty cool. This album's lead single was a song called Legendary Child, which I did like, but when I listened to it, I couldn't help but hear the riff from Wonton Song by Led Zeppelin. I don't know how common that is. Anyway, there is my ranking of Aerosmith albums. The first 2, Toys in the Attic and Get Your Wings, are 10 out of 10 pinnacle Aerosmith experience. And then from Rocks down to Pump, these are albums that I had very positive feelings about, maybe not 10 out of 10, but we're still up there. From Self-Titled to Done with Mirrors, these albums are ones that I had mostly positive feelings about. They were good enough to justify listening to. And then from Night in the Ruts down to the bottom, we have a decline into starting with albums that I didn't love into albums that I actually disliked. That's all the time I got. Thank you for watching.